to Up to the Minute. I'm Todd Duplantis. Welcome to our afternoon edition of the show. Thanks for joining us today. You know, we try to bring you different perspectives with this show, especially for our afternoon edition. And our lives have completely changed over the past few weeks. Businesses have changed. The way we are delivering communication and education has changed. And talking about how the world has changed in journalism, specifically for local television stations. If you've tuned into TV lately, you've probably seen news anchors at their homes, reporters fronting their live shots from their homes as well. The industry's changing, and joining us this afternoon, a very special guest, Wendy Granato, the general manager and president of KTRK-TV, ABC 13. Wendy, welcome this afternoon.
Thank you so much. I always say Todd Duplantis. I don't know why it is I call you first and last name. You and I go way back. People probably don't realize this. We worked together 20-something years ago. Man, Todd, you're a big shot now. I feel so honored. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know. Well, we're honored to have you on the show. I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to bring that up. You know, it was a TV station that's no longer, but we had a chance to work together many years ago. And you've been with KTRK for many years now as well. And before you were general manager and president, you were the news director there for many years. And I want to talk to you about the news operations and how things are changing for you guys now. When did you first realize COVID-19 was completely changing your operations?
So for folks who don't realize this, Channel 13 is actually owned by ABC, and ABC is actually owned by Disney, right? And ABC, the company, we own 8 television stations around the country. So KTRK is one of them. And our sister stations are in New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Chicago, Houston, Raleigh-Durham, and Fresno. So we really do work together and communicate a lot. So I have to tell you, about a month ago, Todd, as we were communicating with our sister stations, I started to realize that what was happening in San Francisco and what was happening in New York was a precursor of what was probably to come, right? And so when we would listen to the stations, especially San Francisco was the first station where all of a sudden in their markets, they were realizing there were stay-at-home orders being put into place. There were people who were being diagnosed quicker than what we were seeing. Restaurants were closing, businesses were closing. And so those stations had begun in overdrive with figuring out how to get more of their staff working remotely, right? So that was about a month ago. And in Houston, we weren't there yet. But we started thinking, if you look at the trends of what's to come, if we are going to be in that pipeline, we better start figuring out the workflow, and we better start realizing that there's going to come a time where businesses are going to close, more and more people are going to be diagnosed, their loved ones may be diagnosed, and we're going to have to be quarantining our staff. We better start putting workflows into place that fewer and fewer folks are coming into the station. So about a month ago is when it began. But in all candor, Todd, it wasn't until one of our employees, and everybody knows now that person is Chauncey Glover, one of our main anchors, who has talked about being diagnosed positive. When Chauncey was tested positive, that's when everything got real. Because we then really had to go through the motions of, did Chauncey have contact with anybody? Who was that? Who do we need to notify? So on and so forth. And thankfully, because we had sort of known that what was happening in San Francisco and New York was coming our way, by the time Chauncey started showing symptoms, we had already put that social distancing in place. So we really were pretty safe that Chauncey had not come into contact with any of our staff here. So we didn't have to send people home, if you will. But that's when it got real, when Chauncey was diagnosed positive.
And in that way, you're covering the story, but in essence, you're becoming part of the story because of your personal experience and one of your employees testing positive. Now, I've seen posts with him in social media. It appears he's doing better. Do you have an update on his condition?
He is. He's doing better. I talk to Chauncey almost every day. We are all being super careful because Chauncey feels recovered, right? He sounds great. He feels recovered. Heck, if he had his way, he'd be back at the station or reporting or, going at it 100%. But his doctors and we are making sure, Chauncey, be careful, take it slow. Todd, if you've ever been really sick, and all of us have, even those of us who, thank goodness, aren't even showing signs or symptoms of COVID, I've had pneumonia before. Your body sort of shuts down for a week, and then you got to ramp back up. So although Chauncey, by all accounts, we think is 100% recovered, we're being careful. But he wants to get back at it. And so I'd say in the days to come, you're going to be seeing Chauncey reporting more from his home, right? More and more, and not just telling his story, but also beginning to anchor, if you will. So knock on wood, we feel like Chauncey, has licked this thing, but we're being super careful. And there's still so much we don't know about COVID-19, being honest.
Absolutely. We're learning something new, it seems like, every day. And you mentioned reporting from home. That's my next question, because I turn on the news today and it literally blows my mind. Here we are. We're doing it here at HCCTV, where we set up operations to live stream remotely from our houses, and we're all doing that. But I'm seeing anchors at home, anchoring the news, and reporters fronting live shots from their kitchen, all these creative new ways. And how has social distancing changed the philosophy of reporting news? It used to be you'd on the streets. There was no news found in the newsroom. It was all on the streets. But now you guys are having to do things completely differently.
It's crazy. In many ways, it's polar opposite of what we normally do. I had one of our reporters, Courtney Fisher, who's one of our morning reporters, who said, she's struggling a little bit with the concept of we run to people, right? It is in our DNA as journalists to run to people, to get their stories, to comfort them when you need to be up close, right? And now it's the exact opposite. So even in the field, all of our reporters have pretty strict guidelines. They are not to come within 6 feet. You really can't have contact with anybody close contact is defined as within 6 feet for more than 10 minutes. So all of our reporters now know you cannot have that kind of close contact. And then, with the anchors and even weather, we're doing now our chief meteorologist, Travis Herzog, for the last going on a week now, is doing all of his weather from his home. That probably was the most technically challenging, if you will, to be able to pull it off, because I want to make sure everybody's clear. These folks are by themselves. At the national level, what you're seeing on Good Morning America and some of the more national entities, they probably have a little bit more support behind the scenes. Not George Stephanopoulos, I would say, who is one of the GMA main anchors, Good Morning America main anchors. I would imagine George is by himself because he just announced today that his wife has tested positive, right? So I can't imagine George can have anyone on the support and production side with him. But I will tell you, our folks have no one. They are there and they're alone. So Travis Herzog is pulling off everything by himself, meaning he is the camera operator. He has to tweak his lighting. He has to take his own cues. He has to change his own graphics. He has to do his own framing. So for most of us, Todd, who started out in small market television, right? As you're shaking your head and laughing.
Yeah.
This is the way we all started. Yeah. So in some ways, we are all going back to what we all once knew, being by yourself and figuring out a way to be both behind the scenes and in front of the camera. and also deal with things that happen in real time, right? There may be glitches, there may be mistakes, there may be things that happen on live TV, and you kind of just have to roll with it. And so, in many ways, it's changed everything, but we've almost gone back. What's old is new again, and that goes for everything, right? Getting outside more, connecting with family more, gardening, taking walks, doing the simple things, and even the most high-tech live television, we are in many ways going back to the way it all began.
I remember those one-man bands very well, and we carried around a lot of equipment in those days. Nowadays, you can do it with a cell phone and do it all. I had one of your reporters, we did a story on us about a year ago, and I called her up. She was on her way to the building, and I was setting up the interviews, and I said, I've got a place picked out if you need to have your live truck meet you for the live shot. She said, no, I use my cell phone now. I just get out of my car and I do my live shot. Like, crazy. Well, of course you do. Wow. So we've already been heading in that direction. Let me ask you this, because at least from being an old reporter that worked in press conferences at City Hall where you were there asking the questions, press conferences are being done differently now from a city and county level where they're doing pool feeds to you guys and you don't have a reporter in the room. I know that's technology. I know we're in desperate times, but does that bother you in a way, or is it hard to adjust to that itself?
It's the right thing to do. It's the smart thing to do. I find there's always values, Todd, you know that, in being present. And there's always value, in my mind, as a journalist, in having different media outlets in the room, being able to ask their own question and look somebody face to face and ask that question. So that would always be our preference. But everything's changed right now. And I think we have to be smart about it, both as the news gathering entities and then the local authorities. I mean, you can't say one thing and do another, right? So they are telling everybody you must social distance, you must avoid mass gatherings. Well, then we have to abide by that ourselves. And I have to tell you, the news entities who normally are all very competitive, and I think competitive is healthy, we really have all banded together and decided to work together when it comes to these press conferences. And the way it works right now is, we all rotate, all the TV stations right now and the Chronicle, we're rotating, and each week we take over the pool. And we not only send the photographer, but we really only allow for one journalist to be there. And then that journalist will ask questions on behalf of all the stations. So for you journalism students, if you pay attention and you listen to all the news conferences, you will hear one reporter there who will say, Mayor Turner, on behalf of Channel 11, I am asking the following question. And then next, Mayor Turner, on behalf of the Houston Chronicle, I am asking the following question. That feels weird, not going to lie, because we are normally so competitive. The last thing we would ever do, right, is compile questions and ask on behalf of each other. But I think it speaks to the world we live in right now. We got to find a way to do things differently and work together for what's best for all of us and to protect the community. So that's something that I don't know if I ever thought I'd see, and we're seeing it. And I think that we are going to, as an entire media, look for ways to work together more right now in this very unprecedented time.
They say desperate times calls for desperate measures, but also in this time, smart measures. I mean, you're being safe with your staff and trying to follow the guidelines that are set for all of us. ABC 13, I'm always impressed with your social media following. I think you guys have 1.5 million followers across all of social media. Has your team found new ways of using your social media in reaching your followers because of this crisis?
So, we have a saying around here, Todd, you won't be number one at anything unless you're number one at everything. And that just really speaks to the way viewers have changed and news consumers have changed. is that there are so many different platforms now, right? It's not just about TV, although TV is seeing a huge resurgence. We just got off a research presentation where we're seeing television is the number one dominant source for local news right now, for all ages, especially you younger viewers out there. We thought we'd lost the 20-something-year-olds, right? We
They're
thought
back.
we lost them to social media. We haven't. So the younger viewers now realize they do want to tune into television to get those very important updates. But I still think that social media is just saturated all ages, right? And so we have to be in that space, in my mind, as a public service. So the thing that really we pivoted with, Todd, when it comes to, I'll use Facebook as an example, is we have now gone all in on Facebook when it comes to those very important press conferences, right? Press conferences now have almost become tentpole events where people gather round, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on TV, whether it's on our website, whether it's on our news app, to really find out what pertinent information is going to be released in these press conferences. And at a local level, where we're seeing it with our mayor, with our county leaders, at a state level, where we're seeing it come from the governor, and then, of course, at a national level, where we're seeing it come from the president. So we, Channel 13, have really put a strategy in place that we use those press conferences to really be a opportunity on any platform, especially social media, to sort of say, guys, this is happening live in real time. If you want to watch it, fine. If you don't want to watch it, you can count on us to quickly tell you what were those big new things that you need to hear about coming out of those press conferences. That's different right now.
I'm glad you mentioned Facebook being successful for you guys, because we found it successful for us. Our students are a little bit older, but it's a great way for us to reach our audience, especially during this time. Outside of the cable channel, we can go on here live and do live streams, and that's been invaluable in our morning broadcasts and our afternoon in getting the word out, and our audiences have exploded like yours as well. Yeah. Let me ask you this. For keeping viewers, I know when I was in news and say a hurricane was coming, it was all hurricane all the time. Yeah. We had everybody reporting about one aspect, and then afterwards it was the cleanup and the recovery. Now we have a major news event like this, COVID, and obviously you're dedicating a lot of your staff to it. How do you create a balance between providing the vital COVID information, but also providing those stories that are vital, the robberies or something, or the good stories that you're telling? How do you create that balance?
That's a good one. And that's probably the thing that everybody in the media struggles with the most, right? But I have to say, Todd, that, as somebody who used to run the news department, and now I'm the general manager, and I always say, guys, I'm going to give you my observations from the cheap seats, right? So I'm not in the thick of all the editorial calls and all the, real-time decisions on move this crew or do this. So I try to always provide a little bit of insight from the viewer's perspective on when to know it's time for us to balance things out, right? And that really just comes from being able to step away a little bit and just be a viewer and just be a consumer. And I have to tell you, if there's a time where I feel like I'm watching a 30-minute newscast or an hour newscast, and you have done nothing but tell me about the doom and gloom, I'm like, enough. You got to provide balance for me. And one of the most important things that I think we're doing right now is we really are always trying to say, tell me what I can do about this situation, right? There's so many things that I am not in control of, but what can I do about this? So whether that is, I can't control what's going on with the spread of COVID. Well, actually, but there are some things that I know I can do. I can choose to follow, social distancing. I can choose to act this way when it comes to, protecting my family. I can choose to change a little bit of my old habits. I can choose to, stay connected in this way. So for Channel 13, we have decided that we are committing every day, every day, every day, while we will report the stats, we will report the scary things that are going on. We have committed to say we are also going to follow up with each and every one of those stories with, but here's what you can do. That combined with, you got to tell everybody about the ways that people are working together, pivoting their businesses, still trying to do positive things for their community, because that's part of reality too. It's not just all negativity. There really is a lot of positive things going on. So we have just committed as a station and as a news organization to really keep ourselves strategic in reporting that stuff too.
Well, you guys have done a good job of that, and I know that's not new for you as well, because you've been doing the ABC 13 reports prior to this, and we worked with you guys on several of those, and that, it's telling different stories that you don't necessarily get everywhere else, positive community stories, and that's what we try to focus on with what we're doing here at HCC as well. Let me ask you this question as a manager. For operations outside of the newsroom, how do you work with your staff there to keep them busy in a proactive way when they're all working remote?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And, listen, I will tell you this, Todd, when you are responsible for putting out 42 live hours of news a week, Monday through Friday, we are live 6.5 hours a day. On Saturday, we're live 5, and on Sunday, we're live 4.5. It takes a lot of people to make that happen. So, so some of that is just by nature of the beast. Even if you're not in the building, but you're outside of the building, there are deadlines all the time. But there are people that, are very learning right now how to pivot to, things that they used to do as part of their 8, 9, 10 hour a day that are no longer needed anymore. And so we are constantly looking for new ways to both make sure everybody still feels like they are contributing, and we are learning new ways to keep connected. I'll tell you, all of our editorial meetings now, and we do editorial meetings in the morning and in the afternoon, they're all done via Blue Jeans. We do a lot of face-to-face connection, even though it's face-to-face like you and I are doing now. I mean, Blue Jeans meetings and Zoom meetings go on a ton, because I think as a manager, it's very important to be able to look at somebody and communicate. And for those folks that are outside and that feel isolated, there's something healthy about knowing I have a schedule to follow, right? And I think that each and every manager at this building is responsible for knowing what is their staff working on, and how many times a day are you connecting with that person to let them know that what they're doing matters, not in a negative way, not in a where we're looking over your shoulder to make sure you're staying busy, but in many ways it's being positive to say what you're doing is more valuable than ever. And so we're checking in with you to see, how are you?
You made some excellent points with that, and you've certainly given us a great insight into the local news coverage and how you guys are doing things differently. Wendy Granato, General Manager and President, KTRK, ABC 13, it's great to see you again. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with our audience this afternoon.
Thank you, Todd. It's been great having you. What the value that Houston Community College brings to our communities, in many ways, you guys, just like us, we think of ourselves as first responders, right? And especially those of us whose roots are seated in journalism. first responders step up when there's a need. And so I thank you guys. HCC is certainly in that category, and it was my pleasure to be with you. And whatever we can do for you guys, we're here to serve. We're in the public service industry after all.
Absolutely. Wendy Granato, thank you for joining me this afternoon. And thank you all for being here this afternoon on Up to the Minute. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Our guest will be Dr. Margaret Ford Fisher, the president of HCC's online college. Have a great rest of the day. One way or another, we're all going to get through this. We'll see you next time.